It was wonderful, beautiful drive from Wellington this morning together with John, and I must say there's some sort of level of familiarity to me in the relationship between Norway and New Zealand. And the landscapes feel extraordinarily close and very intimate, although the population is very scarce. And that means there is some sort of relationship between how you perceive a landscape in relationship to architecture, which was what we started out in 1987 trying to fix in the building industry. As you know, architecture has always a budget. Landscape never has a budget. So whatever is left over of the architectural piece goes into the landscape, and maybe at the end, when the building is finished, you can put up a tree or whatever is left of the money to do some minor landscaping elements. We wanted to change that by putting landscape architecture and architecture into the same practice. And as a collaborative practice at the time in '87, also tried to focus the two budgets into one. So over a certain period of time, we found out that that actually did influence the architecture, working with landscape architects, and the other way around, architecture influencing landscape architecture. So in '87, we took a name, Snøhetta. Actually, it is the name of a mountain, this mountain which you see a picture of. But we didn't take the name from the mountain. We took the name from a beer place downtown Oslo. The whole area, mountain area here, is called Dovre, and the highest peak in this mountain area is called Snøhetta. That's this mountain. In Oslo, there is a beer place called the Hall of Dovre, and we started the practice on top of this beer place. We had a small stair leading down into that place where you drink beer and port wine, which is the normal way of drinking beer in Norway. Since then, in 1989, we won the competition of the library in Alexandria, and we decided to turn it into a shareholding company. And that shareholding company has evolved over time. So for the moment, we have two main practices, although we have offices spread around the world in different locations. The two main offices will be in Oslo and in New York. And as you can see, we're looking for similar locations when it comes to office locations in cities. It is actually quite important. I'll get back to that as we talk about process and as we talk about how people actually influence what we do. I'm starting today with a sort of statement saying that form will follow from the environment. And when we talk about environment, we're not talking about the environment that is surrounding us only, but we're talking about the environments that we are creating in our office spaces, at home, in our cities. We're talking about the environment that is mentally driving us forward, and the environments that are physically driving us forward. And to this extent, we could lead that form is everywhere, as you know, but it definitely has a leading aspect coming from the environment. And that leads us to the first most important element of them all, where three elements can define what we believe we are doing in our practice. We're putting people first, then come the process, and then come the projects. So if you assume that people are the most important thing in architecture, the most important element of any type of architecture, because we are the dynamic element, dynamic part of architecture. We are the moving part of architecture. We walk through these spaces, even in a cathedral. It is, which by the way is quite amazing. I've never been holding this lecture in a cathedral before. It's and especially by Shigeru Bane. It is, I have to say, quite overwhelming. So, people, we're here. People are the essence of architecture. There is no architecture without people. Architecture cannot be self-fulfilling. There is no architecture for architecture's own sake. Only through people can architecture become architecture. And when you talk about people, it could be all kinds of situations related to people. Here, I'm showing you 4 over 100-year-old people, persons, living north of the polar circle in Norway. We interviewed these 4 over 100-year-old people about the Nordic light, to understand the light description of a person who was born before electricity. These people have become specialists because of their age. So all of a sudden they are having a knowledge which we don't have. And architecture is about that historical knowledge which is contained within us and our own experiences. So how do we deal with people in a creative environment? We start with the singular and create the plural. It's about the individual in the group. And the individual in the group creates the collective. The collective cannot exist without the individual input. That's a way of opening up the sources within yourself. And how do we actually organize this? If you look at this cylinder, the cylinder is the parameters that we are setting for the work that we do in the practice. Then you will see the persons moving towards and upwards in the cylinder, each individual. And all of a sudden, you might have a person who says the magical word. It might not even be the brightest person. And all of a sudden, a certain solution or concept clicks in, and you gather the whole team in the bottleneck. That's where the project can continue developing from. But you will also see that the one person who goes straight for the goal will miss. Because in the time frame of things, a goal is also moving goal. If you hit straight for something that is moving, you have to have a certain amount of people moving freely in order to be closest to that dynamic goal which is on its way. So that is enhanced in how we're seated, how we collaborate on an everyday basis, how the office space looks. So you could say this is representing persons. One square, one person. They're located in an open office environment, no office space which is locked off, no way of escaping. And each of those would represent maybe a profession. It could be a sociologist, it could be a psychologist, but it could be a landscape architect, engineer. It could be any type of profession that we have, including the graphic designers, interior designers. So what would happen in a normal setting in a practice? You would locate these different professions or the project together within that space. And they would form a group located in the space. And that would be the communication lines in that office space. We don't do that. We spread the projects, we spread the professions around the space. And all of a sudden, you have an organizational diagram that looks a little like this. It's chaos, but the chaos brings you forward. It is not a chaos that is uncontrollable. It's a chaos that is working on randomness, where you catch an idea that is in the space. And if you can't use it in this project, you might be able to use it in another project. And by that, there is no loss of ideas in a creative process. The collaborative environment, what does that mean? It means that you take all the spaces where you have and include other people into your workspace. You invite people in, you open up the office space, and you're looking for people that will contribute in a certain way of openness into the creative processes that we're running. That could be large-scale workshops, like here with the Ground Zero Memorial Pavilion, where we had up to 50 different stakeholder groups. Or it could be workshop-oriented things with clients. And as you all know, the best client is the client who thought of it himself. The best client is really the client who says, that was my idea. So we let clients work on models. We let them work in the workshop, as I will show you later. And it relates to the final product through a way of evolvement. So the process that we're using, we have defined ourselves. We call it transpositioning, in short, transing in the office. That actually means that we take professions and not only bring them together in a space, but we ask the different professions to leave their profession in the creative work period. That means the landscape architect could become the architect could become the artist, The artist could become the psychologist and so forth. So what does that do to creating things? It lets us leave negative experiences. Let's take an engineer. I know we have an engineer. What do I want from an engineer? Do I want his profession? No, I want the music in the engineer. That's why you have to leave your profession when you're working creatively. Because you will carry the engineer within you in any case. You won't leave that. Same with the architect. So what happens is you break down the negative experiences because you might not have to take responsibility for that particular way of looking at it 5 years ahead. Of course, at a certain point in time, you go back becoming an engineer. That's when responsibility kicks in. But in creative works, you leave it. It's a little like an orchestra where the different members of the orchestra rehearse their different instruments. And all of a sudden, they understand what the full orchestra is about. We have had some few PhDs looking at these type of processes and looking at us at Snøhetta and trying to define what Snøhetta does when Snøhetta is at its best. What kind of drivers create this transpositioning situation? One of them is, of course, your physical environment, the way you actually behave in relationship to where your office is and how you sit and the things I've been talking about. And not the least, maybe 4 extraordinarily important places within the office. We have defined 4, which is our dining table and work table, the coffee machine. Coffee is the most important drug in the world, as we know. And the meeting place for Monday meetings, where the office meets for what we call Monday traffic. We talk about work plan, sure. But we also talk about divorces, we talk about children. We talk about what happened last week and what we expect from the next week. And we read poems. And this poem is a poem relay, which actually then means that you have to pass it on to the next. It is kind of a way of socializing at the beginning of the week. A little like morning assembly, I think it's called in England. And it actually brings you forward. And it breaks down certain situations of being shy when new people are coming in. So I said, yes, the dining table, extraordinarily important. We have a chef making lunch every day for the 120 people in the Oslo office. It's important because people say, oh, why would you do that? Isn't it better, you know? But people don't leave the office. It's great. They stay. And that actually means the half an hour of lunch becomes extraordinarily efficient. But at the same time, we have a lot of bachelors, and without that, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves. But it's also a working space, where the workshops are happening almost on a daily basis. So whenever there isn't lunch, it's a work table. But we also have massive amounts of parties. And these parties are very important because you have to celebrate the small victories in life. But it could be a birthday, it could be a wedding, it could be confirmation, it could be any kind of summer party, winter party, autumn party, spring party. And then we use the long table again. And this table then becomes some sort of community table where everything is shared on different bases. And it's become a symbol also throughout the last exhibition that we did at the DAC Museum in Copenhagen. One of the drivers that we have been following quite thoroughly all the way through, and there were a series of drivers in this book, which you saw, the PhD work, Idea Works. There were about 12 drivers. I'm going to talk about some few of them. One of them is liberating laughter. Now, humor in architecture is long forgotten. And I know it's a serious business, but nothing is too serious to be joked about. And it's a way of removing yourself also into some sort of distance from what you're doing in order to look at things in a certain perspective. So liberating laughter might easily be thought of as something that is creative in its own sense. It has a way of moving people forward, not breaking down the distance between each and every one. Another one which we worked a lot on is rapid prototyping is an important driver. Because in today's world, we can do everything we would like to on the computer. But the computer itself is also at the same time a limitation. All the parametric programs in the world will not have an enormous impact if they cannot be translated analog. So we work with 4 different types of descriptive working methods between analog and digital. We have the analog, which is everything you do with your hands. Analog digital is what you do with your hands that you then can scan and actually give a value, mathematical value in the computer. It is digital analog, which means the things you produce in a computer that then have a physical output, like through an industrial robot, which we have in the workshop. And then in the end you have digital, which is whatever stays in the computer, stays in the computer. And these type of ways of working with rapid prototyping also means that jumping between these different analog and digital principles allows you to test out things that you couldn't test out before. So the workshop methodology, whether it be in New York or in Oslo, is important. And foremost, we have clients coming in saying, can't be done, or we have contractors coming in saying, can't be done. We make it in the workshop and show, here it goes. It can be done. So it is important to have this translation. Another driver is getting physical. We bring the offices around the world, which is now in New York, Oslo, San Francisco, in Innsbruck in Austria, in Stockholm, altogether about 200 people. In Adelaide, 2 people sitting in the jam factory where we're doing a small project. We bring people together 3 days a year, close to the mountains Snøhetta at Dovre, for what we call the Dovre conversations, where we line out what we're going to do in the practice for the next year. We change our philosophy, we look at what is important, we try to understand who we are and move forward. But mostly, the most important thing is that we all climb the mountains Snøhetta. It takes about 4 hours up, 4 hours down. And even if people are coming from the Bronx and the most landscape they've ever sort of walked on is the side of the sidewalk, they get up. Everybody gets up. And everybody manages to get down somehow. And you're exhausted, and you feel so good. So these are the things that relate to using your body. Architecture is not about your brain, or your hands, or your stomach. It's not only about gut feeling, it's about the whole body. And Laurie Anderson, who's a very great music artist, she said, walking forward. Now, walking is preventing yourself from falling forward. Now, that says something about gravity, and there is a reason why all philosophers always were walking when they were thinking. So it's this whole body contact that architecture is about. And that makes us, puts us into situations where we actually really deserve things, like sitting around the fireplace at the end of the evening.